In 2013, one of the biggest retail giants in the United States decided it was finally time to expand globally.
Right. Yeah. Target.
Exactly. Target looked, just across the border to Canada.
Makes sense on paper.
Right. I mean, they saw a shared language, a massive shared culture, and consumers who already knew their brand from crossing the border. So they bought up the leases of, I think it was like 133 abandoned discount stores.
Wow. That is a massive footprint.
Yeah, they poured in billions of dollars and just opened their doors. And within 2 years, it completely collapsed.
Just a total meltdown.
$2 billion lost. They liquidated everything and completely retreated. So the question is, what went so catastrophically wrong? I mean, they had the capital, right?
Oh, totally. The capital wasn't the issue.
Right. They had the products, but what they didn't have was the right data. They just assumed the Canadian supply chain would, perfectly mirror the American one.
Which is a fatal assumption.
Right. They assumed the local software integration would be seamless. But the barcodes didn't match. Inventory just piled up in warehouses while the actual store shelves sat empty.
And the local incumbent competitors, I mean, they didn't just sit there. They aggressively undercut Target's pricing.
Exactly. They walked straight into a buzzsaw
Yeah.
of what economists call informational asymmetry.
Yeah, it really is the ultimate corporate hubris. Just assuming that a line on a map is just a geographical boundary.
Rather than what it actually is.
Right, rather than a completely different ecosystem. Different laws, logistical constraints, cultural expectations. Target learned the absolute hard way that you cannot just copy and paste a domestic business model into a foreign market.
And that failure, that exact hubris, is what we are completely deconstructing today.
It's so vital.
It is. And we are welcoming a very specific listener to this deep dive today. You are an MBA student.
Welcome.
You are staring down a crucial, high-stakes exam on multinational companies and entry strategies, specifically Chapter 11.
The big one.
Yeah, the big one. Our mission right now is to completely decode this material. We are going to map out the entire taxonomy of how massive corporations cross borders without, suffering a multi-billion-dollar target-level collapse.
We are going to tear this subject down to the studs, really.
Exactly. We're rebuilding the frameworks in your mind so you can walk into that exam room, look at literally any essay prompt, and just dismantle it with absolute confidence.
I mean, it is a dense subject, sure, but it is incredibly logical once you see the hidden architecture behind how these corporate decisions are made.
Right.
Because every single strategy we are going to cover today, from simply exporting a crate of goods all the way up to building a massive billion-dollar manufacturing plant from scratch, is essentially just a calculated response to risk.
It's all about risk management.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It is a CEO sitting in a boardroom trying to balance their intense desire for control against their absolute fear of the unknown.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before a company even thinks about crossing a border to, negotiate a lease or hire a foreign worker, we have to look at the prerequisite for going global.
The foundational stuff.
Right. If we look back at the source material, specifically the foundational OLI theory.
Which stands for organizational, localization, and internalization.
Exactly. We need to establish that baseline. Today, we are laser-focused on that I, the internalization aspect. The entry modes.
But to even get to the starting line, a firm must possess what we call an ownership advantage.
And I want to be really clear for you, the listener studying for this exam right now, having a really tasty beverage or a smooth software interface is not an ownership advantage.
No, far from it. I mean, a good product might get you a viral moment on social media.
Sure.
But an ownership advantage is the institutional, structural, competitive edge that actually survives a border crossing.
It has to carry over.
Right. It's the thing that allows you to absorb the massive friction of operating in a foreign market. Yeah. Because you have to overcome the natural advantage that local firms already have.
Because the locals know the turf.
Exactly. They know the language, they know the local politicians, they know the weird consumer quirks. To beat them on their own turf, your advantage has to be completely overwhelming.
So what does that overwhelming advantage actually look like practically on a corporate balance sheet?
Well, we can categorize them into 4 distinct pillars for the exam. First, you have your physical resources.
The tangible stuff.
Yeah, these are your tangible assets. But it's not just, hey, we have a factory. It is a highly optimized, state-of-the-art production plant.
Right.
It is proprietary, highly specialized equipment. Or maybe it's massive land holdings or vast, strategically located inventories that allow you to weather supply chain shocks better than any local guy could.
Basically, the stuff you can physically touch, insure, and depreciate.
Exactly. But then the second pillar, intangible assets, is often far more powerful, especially, in modern economies.
Like IP and branding.
Yes. We are talking about deep-seated reputation, globally recognized brand names, copyrights, and ironclad patents.
It's the halo effect.
Exactly. Think about the global power of a really recognizable logo. A local coffee shop in Tokyo might actually make a technically superior espresso, right?
Oh, probably, yeah.
But Starbucks brings this intangible lifestyle brand that commands a premium anyway.
Okay, so that's physical and intangible. The third pillar is human resources.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't just saying, we have a lot of employees, right?
No, absolutely not. Headcount is not a distinct advantage. Human resources as an ownership advantage refers to the aggregate education of your workforce.
The collective brain power.
Right. It is the highly specialized, decades-long experience of your executive personnel. And crucially, it's the deep personal relationships they hold within the global industry.
Like knowing exactly who to call.
Exactly. Knowing exactly which supplier in Taiwan to call when there's a sudden silicon shortage. It's the unique intelligence of individual staff members who, quite frankly, cannot be easily poached by your competitors.
And the final pillar.
Organizational resources. This is the corporate culture, the internal structure, the proprietary management information systems.
I love calling it the invisible nervous system of the company.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. So when a company consolidates this massive arsenal of advantages, they inevitably look outward. They decide it's time to spread their operations to other countries.
But why? What is the core drive?
The fundamental motivations really boil down to two basic primal corporate goals. First, seeking efficiency, which essentially means ruthless cost minimization.
Finding cheaper labor or materials.
Right. And second, seeking new markets, which is pure profit maximization, expanding the customer base.
But here is where we hit the core problem. And listener, this is the absolute crux of the exam you are preparing for.
Pay attention to this part.
When an MNC, a multinational company, decides to cross those borders for cost minimization or profit maximization, they run headfirst into that brick wall we mentioned earlier with Target.
Informational asymmetry.
Yes. That phrase is definitely going to be the bedrock of a multiple choice question, or maybe even a whole essay prompt. Informational asymmetry.
Count on it. It is the defining friction of international business. It simply means the MNC doesn't know what the locals know.
They're flying blind, relatively speaking.
It's like they are playing poker where they can only see half their own cards while the local incumbent firms can see the whole deck.
Right.
The MNC doesn't know the local incumbent's true pricing power. They don't know the actual reliability of potential business partners.
They don't know who the bad actors are.
Exactly. They have massive blind spots regarding the host country's broader business environment, like the unwritten rules of how permits are actually approved, or how labor unions negotiate locally.
Or even just how consumers react to a certain type of foreign marketing.
Exactly. So the entire taxonomy of entry modes that we're about to discuss, this whole menu of choices a CEO has, is essentially just a sliding scale of strategies to overcome, bypass, or buy their way out of this exact informational asymmetry.
Which is exactly how we are going to structure this deep dive for you today. We are going to build a structural framework in your mind, step by step.
It's the only way to memorize it effectively.
Right. We will start with the broad categories of MNCs. Then we will move into the low-risk arm's-length strategies. We'll climb up the ladder of commitment to massive foreign direct investments. And finally, we'll give you the exact mathematical and strategic parameters CEOs actually use to make these final decisions.
Sounds like a solid roadmap.
So let's start at the very beginning, section 1, the core divide. Because before you figure out how to enter a country, you have to understand what kind of multinational you are actually building.
Right. You have to define your fundamental nature first.
And the source material splits MNCs into two primary buckets.
And again, this divide is driven by those ultimate goals of cost minimization versus profit maximization.
So the first bucket is what we call equity-based MNCs.
Yes.
These are the heavy hitters, right? The company's dropping serious cash.
Literally. These are the companies that acquire the actual equity of the desired capital assets in the foreign market.
Meaning they buy the actual stuff.
Right. They are deploying vast amounts of capital to purchase majority ownership in pharmaceutical labs or massive assembly plants, regional banks, or whatever operating facilities exist in the host country.
But why take on that massive financial burden? I mean, why spend hundreds of millions to buy the equity when you could just partner with someone locally?
Direct managerial control.
Control.
That is the magic word for equity-based MNCs. Buying equity provides the legal and operational right to dictate terms. Period.
You are the boss.
Right. It allows the MNC to completely bypass the local partner's potential incompetence or maybe just their differing agendas.
Because if you own it, you don't have to argue about the strategy.
Exactly. It allows them to connect different international operations directly through their own global headquarters. So they can integrate, say, a factory in Vietnam seamlessly with a distribution hub in Rotterdam without a local partner getting in the way.
And for the exam, you need to know that equity-based MNCs are further classified into 4 distinct subcategories based on what they're actually buying.
Right. You have resource-based companies securing raw materials, public utility companies managing local infrastructure, manufacturing companies building physical products, and service-based MNCs like global accounting firms or banks.
Okay, so that is the equity side. You are buying the assets to buy control. You're absorbing all the financial risk to guarantee the operational standard.
Yes.
But the second bucket is technology-based MNCs. So let me make an analogy here. If an equity-based MNC is like buying a massive, expensive house so you can control exactly what happens inside it.
I like where this is going.
A technology-based MNC is like, what? Just renting out your architectural and interior design skills to someone else's house.
That is a highly accurate way to conceptualize it. You absolutely refuse to buy the house.
Because buying is risky.
Right. You don't want the mortgage, you don't want the property tax liability, and you definitely don't want the risk of the local housing market crashing.
You just want the fee for your skills.
Instead, you are leveraging your highly specialized proprietary know-how to get a cut of the value generated inside a house owned by somebody else.
That makes so much sense.
Technology-based MNCs engage in complex contractual agreements with other firms, and they enjoy the benefits primarily in terms of profit sharing or fixed fees rather than actual asset ownership.
And we can break this down into 4 specific types of arrangements you need to commit to memory for the test.
Yes, 4 distinct types.
Let's run through them. First up on the tech side, management contracts.
So this is where the MNC does the actual day-to-day management of a business that is wholly owned by a completely different local firm. The local firm owns the physical assets, right? The building, the equipment, but the MNC brings the organizational and human resource advantages we talked about earlier.
They bring that invisible nervous system.
Exactly. In return, the net profit is shared by both the MNC and the local firm, or the MNC just takes a hefty management fee right off the top.
But why would the local firm just hire a really good local CEO? I mean, why give away a huge chunk of your profits to a foreign management firm?
Because the local firm recognizes their own internal deficiencies.
Oh, okay.
Imagine a massive real estate conglomerate in Dubai, right? They build incredible skyscrapers, and they decide they want one of those skyscrapers to be a world-class, ultra-luxury hotel.
Oh.
They know how to pour the concrete, they know how to install the elevators, but they have absolutely no idea how to train a concierge staff to cater to international billionaires.
Right, that's totally different skill set.
Or how to integrate the bookings into global luxury reservation systems. So they sign a management contract with a brand like Four Seasons.
Okay, I see.
Four Seasons doesn't own the building, they just run it flawlessly and take a massive cut.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanism. The second type on the tech side is production sharing.
Now, this one is structurally unique, and it's very specific to extractive industries. It mostly happens in the fields of iron, ore, coal, and petroleum.
Heavy industry.
Very heavy. Here, the MNC operates the local extraction business. They bring the massive drilling rigs, the advanced seismic imaging technology, the specialized engineering expertise.
All the heavy tech.
Right. But instead of selling the oil locally and sharing the monetary profits at the end of the day, they actually share the physical output.
Wait, they literally split the actual barrels of oil.
Yes.
Why not just split the cash? That seems way easier.
Because of commodity price volatility and currency risk.
Oh, I see.
If you split the cash, you are relying entirely on the local partner's accounting practices, which could be shady. You're relying on their sales team's competence. And worse, you are entirely exposed to the host country's currency fluctuations.
Which could wipe out your margins overnight.
Exactly. But if you just take your, say, 40% cut of the raw crude oil or the raw coal, you can load it onto your own ships, sell it on the global open market in US dollars, and completely bypass the local financial system.
That is a brilliant risk mitigation strategy and a phenomenal distinction for the exam. Profit sharing versus output sharing.
Keep those separate in your notes.
Third up is industrial lease agreements.
In this scenario, the owner of a facility, and honestly, this is very often a sovereign government, leases massive industrial facilities to the MNC.
Like what kind of facilities?
Well, imagine a host government that built a massive shipbuilding dry dock a decade ago, but they completely failed to run it profitably. It's just sitting there.
A stranded asset.
Right. The MNC steps in, gets to use the facility to operate their own shipbuilding business, and the government just collects a fixed annual rent from them.
Win-win.
Yeah. The MNC avoids the massive capital expenditure of building a dry dock from scratch, and the government gets guaranteed revenue from an asset that was bleeding money.
And finally, number 4 on the tech side, technology transfer agreements.
These are signed primarily in high-technology priority development sectors.
We're talking like electronics, advanced aircraft manufacturing.
Biochemicals, pharmaceuticals. In these fields, the sheer value of the scientific, chemical, or engineering know-how is the entire basis of the partnership.
The IP is everything.
Exactly. An MNC might transfer the precise biochemical formulation for a new revolutionary vaccine to a local lab. That lab might have pristine manufacturing capacity, but completely lacks the R&D budget to invent the drug themselves.
Okay, so listener, if you are outlining your notes right now, here is your foundational memory hook for this first section.
Write this down.
Equity equals control through capital ownership. Technology equals profit through sharing proprietary know-how. Keep those two fundamental motivations radically separate in your mind.
They are completely different philosophies.
Right, so now let's move forward to section 2. We've defined what kind of company you are. Now, how do you actually first dip your toes into foreign waters?
This is the practical application.
Right. We are entering the taxonomy of entry modes.
Yeah.
And we are starting at the very bottom of the commitment ladder with the least internalized methods. These are what the text calls arm's length transactions.
And arm's length is just the perfect descriptor because it implies a strict transactional boundary.
You're keeping them at arm's length.
Literally. You are engaging in business with a foreign market, you are extracting revenue from it, but you are deliberately keeping that market at a distance.
So no big headquarters, no massive local hires.
Right. You aren't navigating local labor laws to hire thousands of workers, and you certainly aren't buying real estate. You are minimizing your footprint to minimize your overall risk.
And the most basic fundamental form of this is exporting.
Exactly. You produce a product or a service in your highly controlled domestic country, and you simply ship it and sell it to another country.
And there are a few classifications to memorize here.
Yeah.
We have the difference between direct and indirect exporting.
Direct is conceptually very simple. You manufacture the goods in your own factory, you find a foreign buyer, and you sell them the goods under your own brand name.
You handle everything.
Right, the logistics, the customs paperwork, the tariffs, you take that on. But indirect exporting is where it gets interesting for the exam.
Let's get into it.
Indirect exporting is essentially outsourcing the informational asymmetry of the foreign market to a highly specialized middleman.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Let's look at agricultural farmers. An individual wheat farmer in the American Midwest might produce an incredible crop, right?
Sure.
But they absolutely do not have the logistical capacity to charter cargo ships. They do not have the legal know-how to navigate international agricultural customs or, phytosanitary certificates or complex foreign buyer contracts.
Their risk tolerance for international trade is basically zero.
Zero. So what do?
They supply their grains to a massive, consolidated agro-based firm, like a Cargill or an ADM.
Exactly. That massive firm buys the grain domestically, aggregates it with thousands of other farmers' yields, and then exports it all under its own corporate brand name.
So the original farmers are technically engaging in international trade.
Yes, their product is being consumed globally, but they are doing it entirely indirectly.
The agro firm absorbs all the transaction costs and the risks.
Right. And besides direct and indirect, you should know we can also classify exporters by volume, small, medium, large.
Or by line of production, like single product versus multiple products.
And by legal status, such as private, public, limited, or public limited companies.
Okay, so that's the straightforward foundational taxonomy of exporting.
Yeah.
But let's elevate the technical depth here. The second arm's length mode is international licensing.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, looking at the mechanics of this in the source text, this is where massive corporate battles are fought. This is prime exam material.
I completely agree. Licensing is one of the most intellectually fascinating entry modes we study.
Okay, let's break it down.
At its core, licensing is a contractual agreement. The innovator, the licensor, allows another company, the licensee, to use invented technology, patents, trademarks, or produce a particular product.
In exchange for what?
In exchange for a license fee or a royalty for a fixed, predetermined period of time.
Sounds simple enough.
It sounds simple, but it is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all contract. We need to deeply analyze the 5 highly distinct types of licensing frameworks for the exam.
All right, listener, pens ready. Let's dissect them. Number 1, exclusive licensing.
In an exclusive license, the licensee is granted a total monopoly.
Wow.
Yes. They are the only entity legally allowed to use the product or technology within a strictly defined contract area and time period.
So the licensor can't work with anyone else there?
Right. The licensor legally binds themselves from giving an identical license to any other third party in that same geographical area.
But wait, if I'm the licensor and I just gave you a total monopoly over my invention in, say, the entire country of Germany, I face a huge risk there.
A massive risk.
What if you just sit on the patent? What if you produce a terrible product and barely sell any? I'm completely locked out of Germany, and I'm making basically no royalty money.
Exactly. That is the primary agency risk of exclusive licensing. And because the licensee is getting a shielded monopoly, standard legal practice dictates draconian performance conditions.
They don't just give it away for free.
No, the contract will relentlessly mandate a minimum sales volume that must be hit every single quarter.
Or else.
Or else. It will require a minimum technical fee to be paid regardless of actual sales. It will place strict restrictions on economic product dealings to ensure the licensee is actively, aggressively working to penetrate the market.
And if they miss those minimums?
The exclusivity clause is immediately voided.
Fascinating. Okay, number 2 is the exact opposite mechanism, non-exclusive licensing.
Precisely. Here, the licensor retains total flexibility. They grant you the right to use the technology, but they explicitly reserve the right to provide the exact same license to your direct competitors in the same area.
But so everyone is fighting each other.
Yes. This creates a hyper-competitive local market, which can drive down consumer prices and drive up total volume, resulting in massive aggregate royalties for the licensor.
Because more people are selling more units.
Exactly.
All right, number 3, sub-licensing.
This is where the original licensee has a specific contractual provision allowing them to essentially act as a mini-licensor.
They pass it down the chain.
Right. They can offer a sublicense of the technology down the chain to a third party. And this is incredibly efficient when dealing with a foundational technology that is diversely utilized across completely different industries.
Give me a real-world example of how that practically works.
Okay, imagine a company invents a revolutionary new type of ultra-durable, extremely heat-resistant synthetic fiber.
Like Kevlar or something.
Exactly. The applications are endless. It could be used in firefighter uniforms, sure, but also in aerospace engineering, deep-sea cables, automotive brakes.
It's everywhere.
But the original inventing company doesn't have the bandwidth to negotiate separate, complex licenses with Boeing and Ford and 50 other specialized manufacturers.
They're thinking army of lawyers.
Right. So they grant a master license to a massive materials science conglomerate, and that conglomerate sub-licenses the specific applications out to the various industries, taking a cut of the royalties along the way.
It's basically delegating the commercialization to the patent.
Exactly.
Okay, number 4, cross-licensing.
This is essentially a high-stakes barter system for intellectual property.
Bartering.
Yeah. It is chosen when 2 competing or adjacent parties both possess a particular protected technology that the other party desperately needs to advance their own product line.
So instead of fighting, they trade.
Right. Rather than suing each other into oblivion over patent infringement, they agree to mutually exchange and use each other's tech.
We see this constantly in the smartphone industry, don't we? Like Apple and Samsung suing each other for years and then eventually signing massive cross-licensing agreements so their phones can actually function on global networks without violating each other's telecom patents.
Precisely. It is a mutually assured destruction detente, resolved through cross-licensing.
And finally, number 5, package licensing. Wait, let me look at this definition in the text. It says package licensing bundles the technology, the required equipment, the components, and sometimes even the capital into a single contract.
Yes, it's a massive bundle.
But why on earth would a licensor front the capital and the equipment for someone else to make money? That sounds like taking all the financial risk of building a factory, but only getting a fraction of the reward via a royalty fee. Why wouldn't they just build it themselves?
That is a phenomenal question, and it's a crucial distinction for the student to understand.
Please explain, because it sounds crazy.
It looks like you are taking all the risk, but what you are actually doing is securing absolute, unbreakable dependency.
Dependency.
You aren't just handing them a blueprint and hoping they build it right. You are saying, here's the blueprint, here's the exact proprietary machine you need to build it, here are the specialized raw materials you must buy from us to feed the machine.
Wow.
And we will even loan you the money to buy all of this from us.
Oh, wow. So they are locked in at literally every single level of the supply chain.
Exactly. It guarantees the absolute quality of the final product to protect your brand, but it also creates multiple layered revenue streams.
You get a cut of everything.
You get the royalty fee, sure, but you also get the margin on selling them the equipment, the recurring margin on selling them the components, and the interest on the capital loan. You have turned the licensee into a completely captive client.
That is brilliant and slightly terrifying corporate strategy.
It's highly effective.
So as an MBA student looking at all of this, the broader strategic question remains, why use licensing at all? What are the core strategic reasons a CEO hands over the intellectual property instead of just internalizing the production?
We can isolate 4 specific, testable strategic reasons for licensing based on the text.
Let's list them.
First, the firm might simply have a fundamental inability to serve a particular market due to internal capital limitations.
They're just too small.
Right. A mid-sized tech firm in Austin might invent a great consumer gadget, but they absolutely do not have the hundreds of millions of dollars required to build a manufacturing hub in Brazil to serve the South American market.
They have the brain power, but not the bankroll.
Precisely. So they license it out to a Brazilian manufacturer who already has the factories.
The second reason involves complementary assets, right?
Yes. The technology might have explosive applications in other lines of business that the licensor has absolutely no interest or expertise in venturing into.
Right. Going back to our earlier example, if DuPont invents a new type of durable rubber specifically for heavy machinery tires, but it turns out it also makes the most comfortable running shoes sold in the entire world.
DuPont doesn't want to start a fashion and footwear brand.
Exactly. They don't want to hire shoe designers or build retail sneaker stores.
It would require extensive, massive investment in complementary assets like marketing to teenagers, retail distribution, fashion logistics that they just don't consider profitable or synergistic for their core industrial business model.
So they just license the rubber formulation to a Nike or an Adidas and just collect the massive royalty checks.
It's the smart play. Now, the third strategic reason is fascinating, and it's where we get into real global domination tactics.
We'll like that.
Using licensing to create and control de facto standards in an industry. Look at the masterclass Ericsson pulled off.
Right. Ericsson is the classic case study here.
This is perhaps the most sophisticated strategic use of licensing. Ericsson holds over 39,000 granted patents.
39,000.
Many of these are what we call standard essential patents, or SEPs, for mobile communication covering 2G, 3G, and 4G technologies. Now, a short-sighted company might have tried to hoard these patents. They might have tried to be the only company making phones that work on these specific network frequencies.
To monopolize the market. But if they did that, another coalition of companies would just invent a competing frequency standard to bypass them entirely.
Exactly. You'd have a wildly fragmented market where an AT&T phone couldn't talk to a Verizon phone.
Which would be a nightmare for consumers.
Instead, Ericsson aggressively licensed their patents to third parties globally, often under what we call FRAND terms: fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory.
Why make it so easy for competitors to use their stuff?
Because by making their technology incredibly easy and relatively cheap for everyone to adopt, they ensured that their specific technology became the widely available, absolute global standard that the entire telecommunications industry relies on.
They wrote the rules of the game, so everyone else is literally forced to play on their field.
Exactly. And by doing so, they embedded their technology so deeply into the infrastructure of the modern world that they will collect royalties on almost every single smartphone manufactured for decades.
That is unbelievable scale.
And the fourth reason for licensing is related to the cumulative, complex nature of technology in certain industries.
Okay, explain that.
Sometimes it's just physically or economically impossible for a single producer to make every single specialized component of a final product. either due to complex technological hurdles or just the massive scale of production required.
So they have to piece it together.
They have to license components from specialists to bring a final product to life. Look at everyday consumer products. Pepsi Cola licenses Heineken, a Netherlands-based brewing company with massive, hyper-efficient bottling infrastructure to produce and distribute Pepsi products in certain European regions.
Wait, Heineken bottles Pepsi.
Yes. Pepsi brings the syrup and the brand. Heineken brings the massive bottling scale. It's an incredibly capital-efficient way for Pepsi to reach millions of consumers without spending a single dime setting up new manufacturing facilities.
That's amazing. But as with everything in international business, there is a massive risk. What is the nightmare scenario of licensing?
The risks are truly existential. First, you fundamentally surrender control over the actual production quality and marketing of your product.
Your baby is in someone else's hands.
Right. Your global reputation is suddenly entirely dependent on the licensee's performance. If they decide to cut corners on raw materials to boost their own local profit margins and the product breaks, it is your logo on the broken product.
The consumer blames you, not the local factory they've never heard of.
Exactly. But the most terrifying risk is intellectual property leakage.
IP theft.
By giving away your product blueprints and process know-how, you might inadvertently be training a future apex competitor.
We've seen this historically with high-speed rail technology, haven't we?
A perfect example. European and Japanese rail companies engaged in technology transfer and licensing agreements with Chinese domestic firms in the early 2000s.
They wanted access to that massive Chinese infrastructure market.
Right. But the domestic firms learned the technology, they localized the manufacturing processes, and eventually they evolved into CRRC.
Which is massive.
It's the massive state-owned rail manufacturer that now routinely outcompetes those same European and Japanese firms for contracts globally.
Wow.
Once the license period expires, you cannot force them to unlearn the knowledge.
That is a terrifying thought for any CEO signing a licensing deal. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3. Passing the baton, we are moving slightly up the commitment and control ladder now.
A little more risk, a little more control.
Right. What happens when you want to outsource not just the intellectual property, but the entire operational brand experience? Let's start with franchising.
Franchising is ubiquitous.
We all know what a franchise looks like on the street. But technically, for the exam, how is this different from just licensing a brand name?
Good question. Licensing is mostly about specific intellectual property. A patent, a proprietary technology, a logo. Franchising is a much broader, highly standardized operational package.
It's the whole business in a box.
Exactly. A firm provides trademarks, yes, but they also provide an entire, rigid operating system, final product specifications, and the exact brand name to the franchisee.
So they tell them exactly how to run it.
The franchisor often dictates the architectural layout of the store, provides mandatory training programs for the staff, runs the national advertising campaigns, and implements rigorous, unyielding quality control audits.
The classic, undeniable examples here are McDonald's and Subway.
Right. And here's the financial touch that is absolutely crucial for your exam: the division of capital labor.
Who pays for what?
The franchisor provides the intellectual framework, the logo, the symbol, the operating manuals, but the local firm, the franchisee, bears the overwhelming majority of the hard financial expenses.
So the local person takes the financial hit.
The franchise buys the land, constructs the building, buys the fryers, and makes the payroll.
Franchising is wildly popular globally right now because, the standard of living is increasing in emerging markets, and a growing middle class is demanding recognized, reliable, quality products.
It's a huge growth area.
But you mentioned unyielding quality control. That is the true cost of franchising, isn't it? The agency problem.
It is the immense overarching burden of the franchisor. Just like licensing, your global reputation is in someone else's hands. But with a franchise, it's not just a product. It's the entire customer experience that is outsourced.
Which is so much harder to control.
Infinitely harder.
Oh.
If one Subway franchise in Mumbai serves contaminated food or has terrible customer service, a video goes viral and it massively damages the global brand equity of Subway internationally.
So how do they stop that?
The franchisor has to invest massive amounts of their revenue into an army of regional managers, mystery shoppers, and auditors. They have to monitor and maintain identical quality standards across thousands of fiercely independent operators who are, frankly, constantly trying to maximize their own margins by cutting corners.
It's a constant battle.
Yep.
Okay, let's pivot to contract manufacturing. I like to think of this as the brain over brawn approach.
That is highly accurate. In contract manufacturing, an MNC focuses its internal capital and talent entirely on the highest value-adding activities. R&D, market operations, branding, and sales.
They handle the brain work.
Exactly. But they hand over the actual physical manufacturing, the brawn, to another party, typically a massive industrial supplier in a developing nation. This perfectly illustrates what economists call the smile curve of value creation.
The smile curve. Okay, explain that for the listener.
Imagine a U-shaped curve, like a smile. On the left, high up is R&D and design. On the right, high up is marketing and retail.
Okay, got the visual.
In the massive dip in the middle is the actual physical manufacturing. The theory is that the actual assembly of the product generates the absolute least amount of economic value and profit margin.
The real money isn't in building it.
No, the real money is made in designing the product and marketing the product. So smart MNCs outsource the bottom of the curve, the manufacturing, and keep the high-value edges for themselves.
And the motivation for outsourcing that middle dip is pure, ruthless cost minimization. Right. The draw of cheap raw materials, laxer environmental regulations, and radically lower labor costs.
Unquestionably.
The classic example is Nike producing its athletic footwear in South Asian countries.
Exactly. Nike's not a shoemaking company.
Wait, really?
Structurally, they are a high-performance design and marketing behemoth. They don't own the massive factories in Vietnam or Indonesia.
That's wild to think about.
The mechanism here is to have a specialized foreign partner assemble the final product, utilizing their massive economies of scale and cheap labor. Then the MNC simply slaps their trademark on the final product, runs it through their quality control checks, and ships it.
So by minimizing the production costs in the middle of the smile curve, they massively inflate their final price-cost margin at retail.
It's incredibly lucrative.
But doesn't that leave them incredibly vulnerable to supply chain shocks? I mean, if you don't own the factory, you can't control it when a crisis hits.
That is the trade-off. You trade operational control and supply chain resilience for massive capital efficiency and higher profit margins.
The final passing the baton strategy in this section is management contracts. We touched on this earlier when discussing technology-based MNCs, but let's solidify it here in the context of operational outsourcing.
Sure. This occurs when a local company or government realizes they have a valuable physical asset but possess poor management skills or low technological knowledge regarding how to optimize it.
They own the asset, but they don't know how to run it profitably.
Right. So they hire a foreign firm that is world-class in technical assistance and management to run it for them.
The examples in the text are luxury hotel management, complex construction management, specialized property management, and even global artist management. And there's a great exam tip here regarding corporate strategy.
Yes, listen closely to this. Management contracts are highly beneficial when a company is aggressively diversifying into multiple distinct businesses.
How so?
If a massive diversified conglomerate decides to expand their portfolio from, say, logistics into hospitality, they don't know the hotel business.
Right.
It is much easier, faster, and safer to control the diversified business by hiring a foreign managerial firm as hired guns via an annual fee or a profit-sharing arrangement.
It allows the conglomerate to rapidly deploy capital into new sectors without having to learn a whole new industry from scratch.
Exactly, mitigating the massive risk of operational incompetence.
Okay, take a breath. We've covered the entire spectrum of arm's-length strategies. We've exported goods, we've licensed our patents, we've franchised our operations, and we've outsourced our manufacturing.
It's a lot, but it builds logically.
Now, it is time to transition to Section 4. The heavyweight champ. We're moving into full internalization.
The big leagues.
What happens when a CEO looks at franchising or contract manufacturing and says, I refuse to compromise my brand standard. I refuse to let someone else control my supply chain. I want total control, significant influence, and a permanent, lasting interest in this foreign market.
That requires a massive leap in commitment.
We are talking about foreign direct investment, or FDI.
This is where the massive economy-shifting capital moves happen. If you want to quote the gold standard definition for your exam, look at the World Investment Report from 2007.
What does it say?
Memorize these key phrases. FDI is an investment involving a long-term relationship reflecting a lasting interest, and crucially, involving control by a resident entity in one economy over an enterprise resident in another.
Meaning, they aren't just visiting, They aren't just renting a room. They are buying the building, moving in, and taking charge of the neighborhood.
Precisely. It implies the foreign investor exerts a significant, undeniable degree of influence on the management and strategic direction of that enterprise.
And the macroeconomic impact of this on the host country is profound. The text frequently refers to a highly positive effect called technological externalities.
That's a great academic term to drop in an essay.
Let's break that down. Externalities usually sound like a bad thing, like pollution. How is a technological externality a positive? What does it actually mean on the ground?
It means productivity spillovers.
Spillovers.
Yeah. When a highly advanced, hyper-efficient NNC sets up a state-of-the-art facility in a developing nation, knowledge literally leaks out of the factory walls into the broader local economy.
Oh, I see.
Local workers are hired and trained in advanced, say, Six Sigma manufacturing techniques. Eventually, some of those workers leave and take those world-class skills to domestic firms.
Elevating the whole talent pool.
Exactly, and local suppliers who want contracts with the MNC are forced to radically upgrade their own technology and quality control to meet the MNC's grueling global standards.
So it creates a rising tide that lifts the productivity and technological sophistication of the entire local host economy.
It's a massive catalyst for development.
To show the sheer scale of this capital movement, look at the historical data drop regarding India in the source text. Net FDI inflows into India skyrocketed from a meager 1.6 million US dollars in 1991, right when they started liberalizing their economy,
Which is tiny.
to a staggering 263.5 million US dollars by 2009.
Just explosive growth. Though we must note there was a significant dip in 2010 due to the aftershocks of the global financial meltdown,
Right.
which highlights a crucial vulnerability for the exam. FDI is highly sensitive to the global macroeconomic climate and interest rate environments. Because it requires massive capital expenditure, when credit markets freeze globally, FDI dries up instantly.
But assuming the capital's flowing, when an MNC decides to commit to FDI, they face a fork in the road. They have two distinct paths, greenfield or brownfield.
Two paths of FDI.
Let's start with greenfield. My metaphor for this isn't just building a new house. Greenfield investment is like trying to transplant an organ into a new body.
Oh, that's intense, but accurate.
You can build the perfect state-of-the-art facility from scratch on an empty plot of land, but if you don't understand the host country's cultural blood type, if you don't understand the local labor market, the micropolitics of local zoning laws, and the invisible supply chain networks, the host country will reject you.
That is a phenomenal analogy because it highlights the incredible friction involved. The technical definition of a greenfield project is where the parent firm constructs a new operating facility in the host country completely from scratch.
Literally from the dirt up.
You buy the dirt, you pour the foundation, you hire every single employee yourself. It gives you absolute untainted control over the corporate culture and the technological layout.
But it takes years to build, and you have to organically grow your market share from zero.
We have a fantastic, highly detailed example of this to use on your exam. Honda Cars India Limited, or HCIL.
Let's hear it.
In 1997, HCIL set up its first manufacturing unit in Greater Noida, UP. It was a massive, incredibly ambitious greenfield project. They bought 150 acres of land and built an annual production capacity of 100,000 units.
But why didn't they just buy an existing Indian car factory? Wouldn't that be faster?
Because existing factories in 1997 were likely archaic, with entrenched union cultures and outdated assembly lines. Honda needed absolute control to implement their legendary Japanese lean manufacturing systems.
You can't just slap a Honda sign on an old, inefficient plant.
Exactly. So they built a wholly owned subsidiary of the Honda Motor Company headquartered in Japan from the dirt up. They own it completely. They control it completely.
But if you decide that greenfield is too slow, too expensive, or the host country's blood type is just too complex to navigate alone, you engage in brownfield tactics. You enter via existing, established structures.
This is the alternative route.
This brings us to Section 5, Teamwork and Takeovers. The text lists joint ventures, mergers, acquisitions, collaborations, and takeovers as brownfield modes.
A lot of vocabulary here.
And as a student, I can tell you right now, the lines between these concepts get incredibly blurry when you are furiously writing an essay at minute 55 in an hour-long exam.
They absolutely do, which is precisely why exam writers love to test them. Your job is to draw the fine, definitive lines between these highly testable concepts.
Okay, Exam trap alert for the listener. Do not confuse a joint venture with a collaboration. They sound like synonyms in casual English, but structurally, legally, they are vastly different.
Vastly.
Let's break them down. What exactly is a joint venture or JV?
A joint venture is a binding structural legal contract between two or more companies to create a completely new, distinct business entity.
A new entity.
They are pooling their capital, mixing their specialized resources, and taking joint equity ownership to launch a standalone enterprise that literally didn't exist yesterday.
They do this to create a new market, share the massive financial risk, and share the resulting profits.
Exactly. And we can categorize 4 specific operational types of JVs to memorize.
Let's list them quickly.
First, consolidation joint ventures. This is a deep structural mixture of existing business operations to achieve massive economies of scale. Second, skill transfer joint ventures.
Which sounds straightforward.
It is exactly what it sounds like. One partner has capital and market access, the other has specialized technology. They form a JV to transfer that skill into a new product, though the risk of IP leakage during the transfer is always a concern.
Third is coordination joint ventures.
Which means leveraging the complementary, non-overlapping capabilities of all partners. And fourth, new business joint ventures, where completely disparate capabilities are combined to create something entirely novel that neither company could achieve alone.
Let's look at a modern example of that new business JV from the text. In September 2016, Volvo and Autoliv launched a JV to create self-driving software.
A great example.
Why a JV instead of just a standard licensing deal or an acquisition? Because autonomous driving was, and honestly still is, highly speculative and incredibly risky.
Right. Volvo makes the heavy metal cars. Autoliv specializes in the deep tech of safety systems like airbags and collision avoidance.
Neither wanted to bear the billion-dollar R&D cost of self-driving tech all alone.
So they combine their complementary advantages to build a new software entity, isolating the massive financial risk within the JV itself.
Another foundational example is Honda Seal Power Products Limited, or HSPP. This was a 1985 joint venture between Honda Motor Co. in Japan, which held a 67% majority equity stake, and Seal Ltd. in India.
They came together to produce a range of specialized power products in India, like portable gensets and water-pumping lawnmowers.
Honda brought the engine tech, Seal brought the local distribution network and regulatory knowledge.
The key to a successful JV, however, is absolute contractual clarity in the roles, functions, and exit strategies of each partner.
Because things go wrong.
If the goals misalign 5 years later, a JV can become a brutal legal nightmare.
Okay, so that is a joint venture creating a new, distinct business entity in totality. How is a collaboration structurally different?
Collaboration is a much looser, vastly narrower agreement. In a collaboration, the companies do not merge their capital to form a new entity.
So no new company is born.
Right. The deal only covers a specific, highly defined portion of the business process.
The example here makes the boundary crystal clear. Look at Bajaj Auto and Kawasaki of Japan.
Right. They worked under a collaboration where Kawasaki only offered specific new technology for tire production.
They aren't building a new motorcycle company together. They aren't sharing equity.
Kawasaki is simply providing technical expertise for one specific isolated component and getting defined monetary returns. It is highly contained.
Developed nations like the US, Japan, UK, and Germany benefit hugely from these narrow collaborations because they can simply rent out their deep technical expertise to developing nations without the massive capital commitment or risk of a JV.
It's very efficient for them.
Okay, trap avoided. JV creates new baby. Collaboration is just sharing notes on one homework assignment. Now for the next confusing pair. Mergers and acquisitions versus takeovers. Let's start with mergers.
In a merger, two roughly equal companies legally join together, dissolving their previous separate corporate structures to become a completely new company or business, usually with a new combined name.
They fuse their balance sheets entirely.
And the critical insight for the exam here involves the human element. You might think mergers fail because of bad financial math, but the text explicitly states that human resource management is perhaps the critical success factor of managing a merged entity.
Why is HR the linchpin there? Isn't it just about combining the accounting departments?
Because you are violently smashing two completely different, deeply entrenched corporate cultures together. You are combining two different compensation structures, two different management styles, and two different sets of massive corporate egos. To attain the theoretical synergy that justified the merger to the shareholders, the human resources of both entities must be seamlessly aligned.
And if they aren't?
If the cultures clash, if the aggressive, risk-taking culture of Company A alienates the conservative, methodical culture of Company B, the talent flees, the synergy evaporates, and the merger fails spectacularly.
We saw this historically with the disastrous Daimler-Chrysler merger. The German and American corporate cultures were fundamentally incompatible.
A textbook failure.
How does an acquisition differ?
Power dynamics. In an acquisition, a new combined company isn't formed as an equal partnership. One larger, wealthier company simply buys another smaller company.
The big fish eats the small fish.
Exactly. The acquired firm is fully absorbed into the parent organization's balance sheet, or sometimes it is allowed to run semi-autonomously as a wholly owned subsidiary.
M&A helps foreign firms instantly find their ground in unexplored host countries, acquiring established supply chains, production skills, and local marketing capacities overnight, rather than spending a decade building them via a greenfield strategy.
It buys time.
And finally, a takeover. How is a takeover different from an acquisition?
A takeover specifically refers to the transfer of control of one firm to another by aggressively purchasing the majority stake in the voting equity, sometimes against the wishes of the target company's board, which is a hostile takeover.
The acquiring company forces themselves into the position of being responsible for all operations.
And the strategic logic here is different. You aren't usually buying a struggling, bankrupt company to strip it for parts.
Right. Takeovers mostly target firms that are already highly profitable, healthy, and possess incredibly famous brand names.
It's a strategic maneuver to guarantee immediate success, seek massive economies of scale, instantly gain high market growth rates, and achieve a dominant monopolistic position in the market. You are buying the winner to ensure you remain the winner.
We have two massive, undeniable examples of takeovers driven by this logic. Mark Zuckerberg taking over Instagram and WhatsApp.
Classic examples.
He saw them as existential threats to Facebook's dominance. Rather than trying to outcompete them, he aggressively acquired these healthy, hypergrowth brands to secure Facebook's absolute network effect dominance.
It was a defensive takeover that turned incredibly offensive.
And historically, look at the dot-com bubble. Yahoo's 1999 takeover of Broadcast.com for a staggering $5.7 billion.
That Yahoo example is a perfect historical cautionary tale of buying market dominance during a period of irrational exuberance rather than organically building a sustainable business model.
We have one final brownfield strategy to cover before we synthesize all of this into the final exam framework. Turnkey projects.
Turnkey projects are very literal in their name. A specialized construction or engineering firm is hired to be entirely responsible for the whole operational process of building a complex facility.
So they do everything.
They design it, they navigate the local zoning, they build it, they install the proprietary technology, they get it running, and then the fully operational finished project is handed over sold as a final product to the buyer.
The buyer takes literally no construction risk. They just turn the key and start operating the plant on day one.
The examples given are Bistek Water Treatment Private Limited in Ahmedabad, which manufactures and exports these complete ready-to-run water treatment projects. And for massive infrastructure, we need to highlight the BOT model in India.
Yes, the BOT model. Build, operate, and transfer.
It is heavily used by governments for massive, capital-intensive infrastructure like dams, toll roads, power plants, and railway projects.
How does it work?
A foreign engineering firm builds the highway using their own capital. They then operate that highway for, say, 20 years, collecting all the toll revenues to recoup their massive construction costs and turn a profit.
And
then, at the end of the contract, they transfer full ownership of the fully functioning highway back to the host government for free.
the government gets critical infrastructure without upfront capital. The foreign firm gets a long-term, guaranteed revenue stream.
It's a massive win-win for both.
All right. We've laid out all the pieces on the board. We've given you a massive menu of options. Now we arrive at Section 6, the ultimate exam framework.
This is how you tie it all together.
This is where we synthesize everything we've talked about for the past hour. If you get the massive essay question at the end of your exam that asks, how does a CEO actually sit down and choose between international licensing, exporting, a joint venture, or a billion-dollar greenfield FDI? This is your answer key.
Listen up.
We rely on transaction cost economics. The framework provides three fundamental parameters, the measurement tools that firms use to mathematically and strategically make this choice.
Exactly. Every single entry mode we discussed is weighed against these three core parameters. Parameter 1, transaction costs. And we must be clear, this is not just the accounting cost of building a factory or shipping a box.
It's much deeper than that.
It includes the massive hidden friction costs of doing business. It includes the search and information costs of deploying a due diligence team to Jakarta for 6 months to audit the shadow accounting of a potential local partner.
Which is incredibly expensive.
It includes the exorbitant contractual costs of having international lawyers draft airtight 500-page legal agreements for exclusive franchising.
And crucially, it accounts for the potential legal dispute costs and the cost of enforcing property rights in a foreign court system if the local partner goes rogue.
Parameter 2, extent of control.
This is a sliding spectrum. On the far left, you have near zero control, like handing over a non-exclusive license and simply hoping the licensee doesn't ruin your brand reputation while you sit back and wait for a royalty check.
And on the far right, you have total, absolute control, building a greenfield, wholly owned subsidiary where you dictate every single operational detail, down to the color of the safety lines painted on the factory floor.
The CEO has to decide exactly how much operational control they're willing to sacrifice in order to save on those transaction costs we just mentioned.
Parameter 3, risk. And risk is never just one thing.
No, risk comes in many distinct flavors in international business. There is the basic commercial risk of the product simply failing to find an audience in a new cultural market.
There is the operational risk of a complex joint venture collapsing due to cultural clashes.
There is the terrifying existential risk we mentioned earlier of IP leakage, losing your proprietary technology to domestic partners who reverse engineer it and become your future apex competitors.
And finally, there is sovereign risk. The macro risk of sudden government policy changes, currency devaluations, or outright expropriation of your assets by the host country.
So the CEO measures those three internal parameters, costs, control, and risk. But those measurements do not exist in a vacuum. They are heavily influenced by the outside world. There are several macro-environmental factors that push the needle on that decision matrix.
Right. Let's run through them. First is the growth rate of the local industry. There's a direct positive relationship here. A rapidly growing, booming local industry promises high rates of return and actively attracts MNCs to commit massive resources, leaning them toward FDI or joint ventures to capture that explosive growth.
Second is the level of technology intensity. Developing countries often operate with labor-intensive, low-level tech. MNCs bring high-level tech via FDI or licensing, seeking to modernize the sector.
Third is the level of competition. This is counterintuitive.
Really? How so?
You might think MNCs want to crush the competition, but most MNCs actually try to aggressively avoid intense local competition. They actively seek out unexploited niche markets to reduce the commercial risk of their massive venture.
Fourth is the ease of doing business, which is a broad metric capturing the overall bureaucratic environment. A functional, transparent regulatory environment provides incentives for high-commitment entry modes. A weak, corrupt, or labyrinthine bureaucracy is deleterious and keeps MNCs strictly at arm's length via exporting.
Fifth are institutional factors. These are the invisible walls. We are talking about the cultural norms, the stability of the legal environment, the societal traditions, the legislative labor laws, and crucially, how strictly and fairly regulations are actually enforced by the local judiciary.
These dictate how a business must operate on a daily basis.
And finally, the quality of labor. A skilled, highly educated, but relatively cheap labor force reduces operational uncertainty, radically lowers production costs, and acts as a massive magnet for equity-based FDI.
Okay, we are in the absolute home stretch. For the student who wants to completely dominate this exam, to really impress the grader and secure that top percentile, you need to cite the academic frameworks. You need to cite Kim and Wang from 1992.
Yes, the Kim and Wang framework is the capstone. They specifically categorize the variables that influence exactly how much control and resource commitment an MNC decides to exert into a foreign market.
They categorize the decision matrix into three specific, highly analytical groups of variables. Group 1, global strategic aspects.
This looks at the global chessboard. For instance, if the global industry is highly concentrated, meaning a few massive players dominate it, and the MNC sees potential synergistic value in closely integrating its new foreign unit with its global supply chain, they will strongly tend to use an entry mode with high control, like a wholly owned subsidiary. They need the new unit to obey global commands instantly.
Group 2, environment variables.
This focuses on the host country itself. It includes host country sovereign risk, location unfamiliarity, cultural distance, demand uncertainty, and competition intensity.
What's the rule of thumb there?
The mathematical rule of thumb here is highly logical. If an MNC faces high political risk, doesn't understand the cultural nuances of the market well, and faces intense, entrenched local competition, they are going to severely limit their exposure. They will commit fewer resources.
They'll lean heavily toward arm's-length modes like indirect exporting or basic licensing to mitigate their downside risk.
Exactly. And finally, group 3. Transaction-specific variables. This brings us back to the nature of the advantage itself.
Right. This is all about the intrinsic nature of the firm's proprietary know-how. If the technology, the formula, or the specialized knowledge an MNC owns generates massive global revenue, but is relatively easy for an engineer to reverse engineer and copy, the MNC faces a massive threat of IP theft.
Therefore, they must choose an entry mode that guarantees them incredibly high lockdown control to protect that asset. They absolutely will not license it out. They will build the fortress-like factory themselves and tightly control the perimeter.
And there it is, the complete floor-to-ceiling architecture of Chapter 11. Let's do a rapid-fire structural recap of the journey we just took so you can solidify this framework in your memory.
Let's lock it in.
We started with the foundational prerequisite. An MNC must possess a tangible or intangible ownership advantage, but when they cross borders, they slam into the friction of informational asymmetry.
To solve that asymmetry, they have to choose their fundamental path. Are they an equity-based MNC buying physical assets to guarantee managerial control? Or are they a technology-based MNC leveraging proprietary know-how to extract profit sharing without the massive capital risk?
We then scaled the taxonomy ladder of commitment. We started at arm's length with direct and indirect exporting, relying on middlemen to handle the asymmetry. We deeply analyzed the highly testable nuances of international licensing, from exclusive monopolies to package licensing that bundles capital, and explored the strategic gambles of breeding your own future competitors to establish de facto global industry standards like Ericsson.
We moved up the ladder, passing the operational baton via franchising, where mitigating the agency problem of quality control is the massive ongoing burden. We discussed contract manufacturing to exploit the smile curve and cheap labor, and management contracts to safely execute diversification strategies.
Then we brought out the heavyweight, foreign direct investment, seeking lasting interest in generating technological externalities. We looked at greenfield projects built from the dirt up, like Honda's massive plant in India, versus the complex world of brownfield entries.
We carefully, cleanly distinguished joint ventures, which pool capital to create entirely new, distinct business entities, from collaborations, which only share specific, isolated, technical components.
And we separated mergers, which required delicate HR synergy to survive culture clashes, from takeovers of healthy, dominant brands like Instagram to secure absolute market dominance, finishing with the financial mechanics of turnkey and BOT projects.
And we wrapped it all up with the CEO's ultimate synthesis framework, balancing transaction costs, the desired extent of control, and multifaceted risk against environmental factors and the Kim and Huang variables.
To our listener, the MBA student, you now possess the complete framework. Do not just memorize the definitions. Trust your understanding of the mechanics. Remember the friction of Target in Canada. Remember why Nike outsources the middle of the smile curve. Remember why Volvo and Autoliv needed a joint venture for self-driving cars.
Use those specific mechanics to anchor the theory, explain the why behind the what, and you are going to absolutely crush this exam.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Something that takes the static theory of the textbook and applies it to the dynamic, real-world global economy you are about to step into.
Go for it.
We noted heavily that contract manufacturing and certain types of FDI are heavily reliant on finding developing countries with low labor costs to maximize corporate profit margins. But global environments shift. As those host countries absorb those technological externalities we talked about, as their local labor forces become highly skilled, and as their domestic institutions evolve to protect intellectual property, what happens to the power dynamic?
That's a great question.
Will the traditional cheap labor markets eventually leverage their new knowledge to develop their own massive, intangible ownership advantages? Will we see historically outsourced markets evolve into high-tech, equity-based powerhouses of their own, acquiring Western brands and forcing Western MNCs to entirely rewrite this traditional taxonomy of entry modes?
We're already seeing the beginnings of it.
We really are. The map doesn't stay static. The flow of capital and know-how eventually changes the topography completely. Keep that evolution in mind as you look at the real business world beyond your exam room. Good luck out there.